Welcome to the My Messy Grief podcast. I'm Cindy Schuffelbarger, a bereaved mom and the founder of P23 Retreat, where we create space for parents to grieve. In each episode, I'll chat with a guest to learn about outlets for our grief in everyday life. By processing grief in healthy ways, we can learn to find joy again while still honoring and remembering our beloved. I'm so glad you're here, and I invite you to be fully present and just rest as you listen. You might laugh, you might cry, you might be inspired. Whatever emerges, you have permission to be curious, to learn, and to explore. So let's get started with today's guest. Well, good afternoon. We're having some fun technology issues. I'm joining you here today for the My Messy Grief podcast. Hopefully you'll find some encouragement here today as we talk about the messiness of grief and look for everyday ways of processing our grief in healthy ways. And so I have today the honor of talking to Jon Gibson, and he is going to be talking to us a little bit about cycling and the role of processing grief. He is a pastor currently. He has a background in that he comes from an engineering background. But in most recent days, he is a pastor, a blogger, a teacher, and he really enjoys his role as a Gallup certified strengths coach and helping people find their purpose and meaning in life as well as their giftedness. So welcome, Jon. I'm so glad that you're here.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate just the opportunity. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we'll get to you'll get to share a little bit more of your story throughout, but just wanted to start with you telling me about your interest in cycling, how it started, what it looks like.
Yeah. So growing up, I'm actually the son of a pastor too, which is probably why it took me so long to become a pastor, because I didn't want to become one. And we just, we had limited budget growing up. So I, either did school sports with secondhand equipment or whatever. And I had really wanted to cycle more when I was a kid, but we just didn't have the bandwidth to do that or the resources. So it had kind of always been like one of those put it on the back burner things for me. And then, we've been in the Richmond area for just under 20 years. And it's been crazy for at least half of that with young kids, the first part and stuff. So just life didn't afford it to me. And then a few years ago, a good friend of mine passed away, and I kind of took that as an opportunity. He passed away young at 43. So I kind of took that as an opportunity to say, hey, let me just kind of do a reset in so many different areas of my life. And that was one of them. And I had a secondhand bike at the time. Just I had heard everyone talk about the Virginia Capitol Trail, decided I was going to hop on there. So after leading his funeral the next day, I just went completely off grid, and it was my longest bike ride up to that point. I did like 30 miles, and it was just really cathartic for me. And so then I started buying bikes after that. So I'm on my third bike since then, I guess. And it's just been a great opportunity. We're blessed where we are in Central Virginia to have this 53 mile trail that's like car free that we get to ride on from capital to capital. So basically Richmond to Williamsburg, Jamestown. And so I've ridden hundreds of miles on that. I've actually ridden that trail completely twice. So just over 100 miles. They call it a century ride as well. So, and I raised money, and again, we'll talk more about grief in August for the American Cancer Society, and had my biggest month of cycling yet. I cycled over 500 miles for that month. So it's pretty cool.
That's great. Well, and I forgot to mention your family. You're married to Carrie of 24 years, and your oldest Dylan is at William and Mary, and then you have Tucker and Chloe who are still at home. But my question to you is, have you ridden to see Dylan yet on that bike trail?
Good question. Yeah. Yes, I actually have. And I actually twice so far now. So last last Sunday we had stuff to drop off to him, and sort of on a whim, I said to Carrie, I'm like, hey, if you guys leave at 4, I'll meet you over there. So I left obviously a few hours before that, and by almost 50 miles that day. So,
Fun.
and then last Friday, I decided to, I had some more stuff to drop off to him. And at the end of the trail is where, if you know Williamsburg, Jamestown at all, Jamestown Settlement parking lot is at mile 0 on the Capitol Trail. And conveniently, there's a brewery right there. So I actually rode 41 miles, had some extra time before I was meeting him, and just hung out at the brewery looking at the boats, and it was a pretty cool, pristine little setting there. So
Perfect. So Chase actually rode it when he turned 13. Like from the time that our kids are 12 to 13, we would give them a series of challenges, and he wanted his physical challenge to be riding the Capitol Trail. So he and Scott rode that, and I played wingman by picking him up at the end. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I have not reviewed it yet, but they can say they've done it. So what you mentioned losing your friend. I know you're no stranger to personal loss. Your parents at unexpected times, and your good friend, and also you walk with people through grief. As a pastor, you see all sorts of hurt and different sorts of grief. I'm curious, how does the physical act of cycling mirror the ups and downs of grief, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I not only remind myself in grief, but remind other people, is that it's not linear, because so many things in life, if things aren't linear, we try to make them linear, and I think we do that with grief. We try to make it seem like it's going to go in a straight path and go at a certain like ramp up, and that's just not. We don't have that luxury. So there's a cyclical nature to grief. I mean, especially in the fact that every year we've got anniversaries, we've got, reminders. And so, yeah, there's something about this idea of like the cycle of grief and the cycle of time that I think, just thinking about what that looks like in terms of cycling. Like I hate running. And that was one of the other things that drove me to cycling. Like I just feel like I put so much effort in, I get nowhere. Whereas with cycling, I can ride 50 miles. I feel like I've accomplished something. It's good for my body, but it's good for my soul and my brain as well. And so yeah, that effort of putting things like into a healthy, a healthy way of letting some of these emotions out. I feel like, especially with grief. And if you subscribe to the Enneagram at all, I'm an Enneagram 8. And so my primary emotion is anger, which is a secondary emotion. And so anger is never anger. It's always covering for something else in me. Mm-hmm. So what I've had to learn to ask myself over the last few years is, what is this anger covering? Is it grief or loss? Is it lack of control? Whatever. Because oftentimes I'd find myself getting upset, mad, and realize this isn't about this is about that. And so to have process time too, like I'm an extrovert and an Enneagram 8. So like to have alone process time for hours on end, to be able to say what's going on in my heart, what's going on in my soul, like it's really good for me.
Good. Yeah. I would also add that grief is hard work. And so riding a bike, absolutely. I mean, there are some downhill moments, but it's mostly hard work. So, which is more why I choose to run, because, well, I should say my fear of bikes comes from, I think on our third date, Scott talked me into getting a mountain bike, and he took me mountain biking, and I ended up in a creek. And so I don't usually fall when I'm on foot, but on a bike, I've been known to topple a few times. And so,
yeah. Well, and it's, I had to slowly work out some of those fears, which again, I mean, so when I first started riding, I did not clip in with my shoes. I did not have biking shoes or anything. And I finally, probably 6 months into doing it, was when I finally decided I'm gonna bite the bullet and actually clip in, because it's a very, I'm a control freak. So to not have the control of just being able to stop and put your feet down without actually doing something, it's a little unnerving. And you have to
Right?
suck up. You have to be humble, because you are going to fall. And that's what my friends said. They're like, you will fall. And I'm like, no, 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 I'm not going to fall. Well, I've fallen. So, yeah. So and again, mirroring grief, right? Like, you go through this unknown process where you don't know when it's going to hit. You don't know how it's going to hit. You can't control it. And in the same way, like with biking, like when you're going on a new path, you have no idea where the hills. I mean, you can map stuff out as much as possible, but I mean, just actually this summer I brought my bike up to Connecticut when we visited family, and I went out, and not 2 miles in, I had like this major uphill, and I was like, how do you do that in the beginning of your ride? This stinks, like, right? But I mean, there's a parallel in some ways to go like, hey, life gives us these moments where we go, I don't know if I can do this. And we've just got to press into it and say, hey, I'm going to do my best. If I fall, I fall. If I have to stop and walk my bike, so be it. Like, it's what happens, you know?
Yeah, and even shifting gears, right? There are different things that we can insert or have different supports along the way, just by shifting gears that can help us in our as well as cycling. So
Oh
yeah, I
yeah.
love the
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
great. So you've mentioned the Capitol Trail. Do you have other certain roads or landscapes or even rituals on a bike that hold special meaning to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I meet with a spiritual director once a month, and he and I met this morning, and I told him, I'm like, hey, I'm going to be going on this podcast. And so he was probing me too, because I think he was curious, like, what's going on. But um yeah, one of the things that I have learned is that people are not incredibly gracious to cyclists on the road. So I generally have said, in the summer it's easier to do this, because if you get up at 5 on a summer day, it's light. But like now, as fall's starting to come in Central Virginia, it's a little bit harder because it's darker, it's colder. Um, so I try to do that. I try to do, like, if I'm going to be on roads with vehicular traffic, I try to do it at a time when there's no bus traffic, there's no student driver traffic,
Right?
um,
That's
and preferably no deer, as well, in certain parts of Hanover where we live. But one of the things that I've really worked hard to do is that I will actually pull my phone out. It's not the safest thing in the world, but I'll pull my phone out while I'm riding, and I'll take a picture of something that strikes me on the ride. Because what I have really realized is that it's a gift for me to be able to do what I do. And so if I can even just capture one frame of what I felt like was a gift, like, last weekend when I rode to Williamsburg, I rode over the Chickahominy River. And, it's a gorgeous setting, and especially on a beautiful day. And even though I want to keep pushing through, I'll force myself to stop just to take a picture. And so it's a good thing for me to do that. And then, of course, there's plenty of apps that I will keep track of, like time and stuff like that, and see if I can push myself or not push myself. So just, again, pushing myself, because even only 2 years into this, I still don't know what I'm capable of. And again, just like grief, we don't know what we can handle. And so we're pushing ourselves and saying, hey, let me just go a little bit further and see what I can do here. And yeah, and go. And, I ride with other people, but I also realize that like, it's a whole new ball game when you do big group rides too. So yeah.
Well, have you ever thought of doing a GoPro instead of taking your camera out, your phone out?
I probably should look into that. I mean, for a number of reasons. I mean, I just read in the news last week that there was a guy who got hit, and the people took off. Thankfully, he was okay. But I'm like, I think, and Life 360, beautiful app, right? My wife not only looks at our kids, but when I'm off on a ride, she'll look to make sure I'm still moving. So, she can track me.
That's great. Well,
yeah.
Good. So with all these hours that you're logging, Mike, have there been moments that brought you unexpected clarity or release?
Yeah. So when I did my first century ride, which is 100 miles, we went through Williamsburg, and I had never been on the trail over there before. My dad, like I mentioned before, was a pastor. He retired and moved down to Williamsburg with my mom. 2 months later, my mom was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and even though she fought it, it was a 6-month journey, and she passed away. And then my dad just had lost so much himself. He'd lost, his identity as a pastor. He'd lost his home because he moved far away. And then he lost his partner and wife. And so it was just a battle. And because I was closer than my brother, it's just my brother and I was doing that trek from Richmond to Williamsburg at least once a week. And my dad finally moved to a facility called Patriots Colony, which I did not know was right on the Capitol Trail. So the first time that I'm doing this century ride, I was doing it with a friend, and all of a sudden we come rolling up to that, and it literally took my breath away. I just, it was something about that place, knowing that that's where my dad took his last breath. And I don't know if I looked like I'd seen a ghost or what, because my friend's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "That's where my dad died." And he's like, "Whoa, dude, like, are you okay?" And I'm like, I said, "I will be." I'm like, "Well, just let's keep on with this." And so, it's leaving space. One thing that I've done, I feel like, as I've gotten older, is like creating space for things, especially the fact that I know I can't control stuff. So if you leave space for it, at least the uncontrollableness of it can be at least somewhat contained in a safe space or whatever. So for me, like, getting on the bike is a safe space for me to be able to go, "Hey, I've got to process stuff. I've got, a century ride will take you 6 hours if you're doing it at a decent pace, and half of that 3 hours. So it's not uncommon for me to be on the bike for 2 to 3 hours. There are some moments where there's nothing in my head. I mean, like, it's empty. And then there are other moments that I'm processing through conversations. I'm processing through sermons. I'm processing through grief. And yeah, just working stuff out. And I think the physical, like you said before, Cindy, that this idea that grief is work, and knowing that there's a physical exertion that's going by, it almost parallels your mental and emotional exertion as well. And so this processing time is not just a physical processing of energy and stuff like that, but it's also a processing of like these deep thoughts, these deep emotions. And I just, some people think that I don't like deep and strong emotions. I'm fine with dealing with them, but I like them to stay in their place, which doesn't happen very often. And so just being able to say, I've got a place where I can get really mad and I can get angry, just like the Psalms, right? Like where David he expresses these deep, deep emotions, but he always ends in the same place. He always ends on, but the Lord, has me, basically. And so to me, that safe space is my bike,
Love that. So, I don't know if you, but our mission for P23 Retreat is creating space for parents to grieve. It's as simple as that. We're trying to give people a place to go push pause, and just as you bike, sometimes your mind's blank. Like sometimes you just need pause and rest, and other times you have things working out, and hopefully it's both ends. And so we give people 3 or 4 nights away so that they can just have that space. It is easy. And so just giving them the space to go, and whether that's to feel the emotion or work through and try to process and figure it out, or just have a break. I love, when you're in this place of flow, and so nothing else is weighing on you, you're completely in the moment. I see that happening on the bike, as well as, as it parallels to grief.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's something really powerful about just creating spaces. I mean, if, believing in a triune God, like who I believe, firmly that the Holy Spirit is present. And I think sometimes when we don't leave space for things like grief and other strong emotions, we're basically saying, I don't believe that the Holy Spirit exists. And so for me to go, hey, like, creating space, just basically, it's like a garden, right? Like I'm doing all this preparation so that something can flourish and grow and accomplish what it needs to here. And I believe that when we create spaces, whether it's for grief or whatever it is, the Holy Spirit can do the work that he's going to do inevitably anyway, but we leave room for him to do it instead of trying to control it and direct it and take it on ourselves,
Beautiful, right? And there's rest that comes in that when we give him the permission to do it and create that space.
Oh yeah,
love that.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
So we've touched on some of this, but what role does endurance, rhythm, or movement play in working through these heavy emotions?
Like I said before, I think for me, anger, especially when I was going through all that grief with my parents, I could feel it coming out in anger, especially because my kids were super young. My youngest didn't even know my mom. She was born two months after my mom died. My oldest is the one who knew her the best because he was almost 4, I guess, when or 5. But it's hard during normal circumstances with toddlers to not get angry at times with certain things. And so feeling that extra emotion on top of it for me, I was like, gosh, what do I do? And at the time, we were starting a new church. I was in seminary. I was dealing with, young kids. There was so much stuff, and it's uncontrollable again. Like you do your best to create capacity, to know your own limitations and boundaries, but sometimes life just gives you a lot. Right. And so, for me, like in fact, I just said this in the sermon yesterday. I said, I realized a long time ago that there's a pecking order at the end of the day of people that I don't want to tick off. Like God is at the top, my wife is next, and my kids are after that. And then it kind of trickles down. But, realizing that especially in moments that are harder with stronger emotions, we can get more insular. And so the only people that get the brunt of that, if we're not careful, are the ones who are closest to us, our wife, our spouse, our kids and stuff. And so, and that's why, I've asked myself countless times, like, why did I not find cycling before that? Of course, I probably wouldn't have had the bandwidth at the time to have done that. But now, I think part of the reason why I cycled over 500 miles last month is because of the grief of having to send my oldest off to college, and, people don't think of that as grieving, but it's grief nonetheless, because it's a different it's a change of life. It's a change of relationship. It's all this stuff. So I'm like, well, I will pat myself on the back a little bit to say, hey, the strong emotions that I was feeling in that month, especially leading up to it, I was just getting on the bike and going, how do I process this? How do I push myself? And yeah, one of the guys that I ride with, he's like, why are you trying to kill me? And I'm like, I'm not trying to kill you. I'm trying to kill these emotions that are within me so that I can like move through them, but my wife has been super gracious, and she doesn't even question. Like, I mean, the other day when I'm like, hey, I'll meet you guys over in Williamsburg in 3 hours, she didn't even bat an eye. And I'm like, thank God that I have, a helpmate, a spouse who's willing to say, hey, I know what giving you this space will do for you. So have at it. Just come back a better person,
Right.
even though she's never said that. I think it's implied,
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a million stories about times that your emotions could be worked out on a bike instead of directed at a person. And so there's that. And just the rhythm of, I think of a metronome sometimes can be soothing, but that pedaling motion just around and around, while you're making forward motion, there's just something powerful in that too.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I don't know how familiar you are with like John Mark Comer, and he's a writer and former pastor, and he talks a lot about rules and rhythm. And when that idea was introduced to me a few years ago, I mean, Enneagram 8, church planner, doesn't like rules. Like there's just, don't tell me what to do. Right. And so that idea of rules and rhythm sounded so like confining to me when I first heard it. But now, especially because when, I didn't just hop on a bike one day and ride 100 miles. I've had to train to get to that place. And the spiritual life is like that too, where we've got to cultivate things to get to a certain place. If we want to see movement, if we want to see growth and development, we've got to start somewhere, and we've got to be moving with an intentional rhythm and create certain rules for ourselves. And so I've begun to embrace that idea of a rule and a rhythm much more so. And I think cycling's helped me do that, because I've seen that you can't get there, as they say up in New England where I was born, you can't get there from here, right? Like you can't get there without having some kind of plan. And I think the same thing, like creating that rhythm helps you. It's not foolproof, and you may have to change on the fly, but it helps you be able to move through it much more succinctly and intentionally when you create like these rules and you create a rhythm to do things. And so that's why, again, because I'm a control freak, like weather is a really frustrating thing when it comes to cycling, because all of a sudden, you had your cycling day planned out. It's going to be this Wednesday, and then it's pouring outside. And no matter what, you cannot mirror and mimic riding out on roads on a stationary bike. Plus I've got like wicked ADD, and to sit in the same spot for 3 hours is just unheard of.
Infuriating, right?
Yeah. So being able to go, hey, I've got to shift. And again, I think grief is like this too. Like all of a sudden it sneaks up on you at an anniversary or something like that in a way that you didn't expect it. And you've got to give it space, and you've got to adapt to it, or strong emotions are going to, you're going to leak all over everybody around you with those emotions, or you're going to isolate yourself to the point of like some serious damage, I think, and my wife is super adaptable. I've said for years that part of the reason why God gave her to me is because she's so adaptable. I do not have that same gift that she does. But when you're married to someone for 24 years, hopefully their good rubs off on you, and that adaptability has rubbed off on me. I'm still nowhere near as proficient as she is in it, but it's helped me to go, because like I'll say something to her and she'll be like, why do you let that bother you? And I'm like, what? Okay, I've like that doesn't compute in my brain. And so again, creating space with the two of us to go like, hey, I need your help here. And God's given me a gift of someone who can complete me and have parts that fit into my gaps, so
Love that. I've often made discoveries of why my behavior and choices I'm making. I will sometimes have clarity when I'm exercising, and it's because I'm not trying to figure it out at that point. I'm exercising a different part of my body and maybe not my mind, and all of a sudden it becomes clear, oh, all of these hard feelings I'm a couple of weeks out from this anniversary date, and this is grief just playing out in a different way. And so it's helpful people recognize that in us and be gentle or patient, whichever it looks like. And maybe it is, hey, why don't you go for a bike? You feel better, right? But understand there's something else going on underneath.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the first time, so the day after my mom's funeral, we were in a car, all four of us at the time. Carrie was pregnant with my third, but up to Connecticut. And as we crossed over the New York Connecticut border, I could feel something within me. I didn't know what it was. And I was going like, what is going on here? And then we passed the exit, that my hometown exit, and I lost it. Like everything within me just broke. And I was just sobbing, trying to drive a car through tear-filled eyes and whatever. And Carrie didn't say a word. She just reached over. She put her hand on my shoulder and my neck and just, saying, hey, I'm here. I love you, in just a simple touch. And so like, there have been moments like that. Even, my mom died in 2011. There have been, and my dad in 2013. Like it's been 14 and 12 years, and moments like that still sneak up on you, and you're going like, whoa. So I've actually started to almost prepare myself. I keep the anniversaries on my phone, like on my calendar, because again, I'm a control freak. So I'm like, well, at least I know if it's coming, I can start preparing myself for it. And you can never prepare completely for it, but at least you can know, hey, not only warn yourself, but warning other people like, hey, this is coming. I just need you to do it. And I've been in a group with two other people sort of doing transformation and life and accountability together. And I've said that to them and said, hey, just want to let you know my answers this week are probably going to be limited or short, and don't take it personally. It's just what I'm having to work through. And so that self-awareness that comes with grief and stuff like that, not everyone's going to respond well to it when you say that to them. I mean, there's still people who are old school and who are like, oh, there's no place for that stuff. Once the funeral's over, just get done with it and whatever. And I'm like, nah, it ain't the way that I'm wired. So at least telling people, hey, this is how I'm going to come. This is how I'm going to show up in this space here. And just give me some grace, because I just, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best to push through.
Right. And the more we share that with people, the more we're educating people what grief looks like, that we don't have to stuff it and walk away from it, that it does continue to resurface. So yeah, keep sharing. And again, we can prepare the people around us that this day is coming or whatever. So what would you say is the biggest thing cycling has taught you about resilience, healing, or hope in relation to grief?
I think I said before that, with grief, you don't know what you can handle. I mean, my mom was like a best friend and a mentor to me and everything. My dad and I were close, but my mom and I just had a a different kind of relationship. And like my love of scripture, my love of prayer, my love of so many things really goes back to that. And so, and I was her baby, you know, I mean, she only had 2 kids and I was the baby. And so she definitely was my champion for lots of things, especially younger years and stuff. But like, you don't know what you can endure. I mean, when Job went through what he went through in scripture, like he didn't know that he could deal with that. I mean, and in a similar way, like cycling, you know, I did my first century ride after I'd only been riding for like 7 months. And I had set it as a goal when I first started, but I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this for a long time. Now, man, it hurt. It was painful, you know, doing it 7 months in. My second one was way better than the first one was, but like in some ways I just wrote down, I'm like, I felt a little like the little engine that could, you know, with cycling, that you're going like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And I think we push through grief like that too, where we're going like, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. You know, I'm surprised nobody's ever been critical of Jesus using the example of childbirth in John 16, because a lot of women would be like, what do you know what you're talking about? You've never had a child before. But like, having witnessed like my 3 kids being born and seeing the pain and anguish in my wife's eyes, you know, Jesus's words about, you know, a woman giving birth to a child's pain because her time has come, but when her baby's born, she forgets the anguish because her joy that a child is born into the world, right? And like knowing that we can endure hardship for a time if we know there's a purpose for it, you know. And you know, the thing about grief is that we don't always know what the purpose is, if there's a purpose, like on this side of like eternity. But God's given me the benefit, I feel like, of seeing some of the purpose of like my grief, even what you said before. Like, I am constantly astounded because I put it all out there as much as I can. I mean, I blog and I put stuff on social media, and it probably makes people uncomfortable, and I could care less about that. But like, the fact of the matter is, like, I've been in places where people have come up to me and said, thank you so much for being so honest about your journey with grief. And I'm going, I don't know how else to do it. Like, I just don't. I mean, I wear everything right here on my sleeve. And when I can see that there's purpose beyond it, and I can see that there's something good coming out of it, it's helpful. And so, you know, I think that's why women will have more than one child, because they forget the pain of what they went through and just realize the joy of that. And I'm going, gosh, one would have been enough for me. I think I would have just called it quits at that point. But, you know, same thing with grief in a different way. Like, you're just experiencing this incredible pain and anguish, and you're going, I don't think I can. I mean, I remember Carrie when she was having one of our kids, and she's like, I can't do this. And I'm like, no, you can do this. And you know, and I think we say the same thing. We're like, there's no way I can live without this person or this in my life. I don't know how I'm going to continue to press through this. And you just do. And that's why, you know, even like on a bike, you go, oh my gosh, I just finished 50 miles. I got 50 more. There's no way I can do this. And you just go, no, you can do this. You will. And it's just pushing yourself to that point of going like, I don't think I can do this, but I'm just going to keep going. And I can't see the finish line. I can't even see a mile in front of me, but I can see the 10 feet in front of me, and I'm just going to get to that end point, and then I'm going to reset. So it's like a series of resets, it feels like, of just going like, okay, I got this far. Let me celebrate. Let me celebrate. Let me celebrate. And I think that's another aspect of getting through hard stuff is going, if you're not a celebratory person, become one. Because when you go, hey, look what I just did, like there's something significant about that to go. And, God's given me a lot more grace in recent years to be able to not only see that in people, but call it out in a good way and affirm them and say, hey, I don't know if you realize the gravity of what you just accomplished there. Let me just point out to you, as someone who's seeing this from the outside, that what you did is so out of character, is, such a moment of and picture of growth that you need to celebrate this. And that to me is one of the reasons why we need community too, is because we can't see things in ourselves, or we're going to be our own worst critic. And all the self-talk's going to try to, stifle us down. But if we have other people who can see what we're not able to see and can affirm us, and hey, you're way further along than you think you are, man, that's a gift.
Right. Well, gosh, I wish we would do more of that, really. There's a researcher in the field of grief. She talks about the grieving brain, the grieving body, but she's done a whole body of research. And she says grief is learning. And it shifted how I perceived grief. And it does make it a little easier to, one, give ourselves grace. You know what? I'm still learning. And I'm learning how to express it, how to process it, how that plays out in my life. But also it gave me the chance to say, wow, look how much growth has happened. So, I wish we would celebrate that more in people, and those people. And this is maybe a challenge to whoever's listening. If you know someone who's grieving, look for the ways that you can give those words of encouragement, not you should be doing this differently, but look at how much you love your person and how you're pushing through to find meaning, and you're still trying to live a meaningful life with grace and love.
Oh yeah, that's huge. Yep.
So.
Yeah.
So much to think about.
It is really. Yeah. Well, and I think just tagging on for a second on that too, I think, like I said before about the lack of the non-linearity of grief. I think the other thing that we sometimes do is expect that, like, I've lost a parent too, so I know exactly what you're feeling. No, you don't. Like, yes, there's similarities there, but like every loss is its own loss. And
right.
So again, giving space for people to say, like, hey, you know what? Like, I was there when both my parents died, and I felt like that was actually a gift for me to be present with them. I also had no like ill will, like there was no, nothing I felt unsaid or anything like that. I realized that not everybody can say that. And so to know that, like, hey, like that person died and you had a lot of like pent up ill will and all kinds of stuff, that's going to change the whole dynamic of your grief. And it's going to shade it in a different color than my grief because of just the complications in that. And so being curious, about stuff and staying curious about stuff and going, hey, and that's why strengths for me is good, because it helps me stay curious to go, like, I've never seen this before. Where's this coming from? But it helps me also carry it over to things like grief, where I'm going, hey, you might think you know what this person's going through, Jon, but why don't you ask some questions that will sort of unearth what's really going on, maybe what some of the bigger picture issues are, or what some of the pictures that are different, how this differs from you. So that's been really, really helpful.
Yeah, great point. Keep asking questions of people instead of imposing expectations.
Yeah.
Well, if someone is new to cycling, but maybe they're a little hesitant, what advice would you give them about starting that as a practice?
Start slow. Not everyone's going to jump head first in. And I mean, even as psychotic as some people see me, I've got friends who are like way over the top. And like any community, you've got to find your people. I'm, like I said, fortunate to live where I live and jump on the Capitol Trail, or I'm planning a trip to the Blue Ridge Parkway. I've ridden on the High Bridge Trail out in Farmville. But like part of the reason why I've avoided group rides is because I've been on some pretty crappy ones where I've got these high strung people who are like not making it exciting and fun at all. Meanwhile, there have been other rides that I've gone on with multiple people, strangers, that I'm like, that was some of the most glorious moments I've experienced in the last few weeks, of just really kind and generous people and stuff. So being willing to try stuff and say, hey, I'm going to just do this. And if you're afraid to do it alone, find somebody else. Like there's a guy who's in leadership at our church, and he and I ride regularly. He's retired and I'm a pastor, so my schedule is fairly flexible. So, but it's always more than a bike ride. That's what I will tell people. It's like, it's other stuff happens. We keep talking about that notion of space and creating space for things. And so, just try it and see what it is. I mean, I think just to be able to say, hey, I did this, or I never thought I could do this. I never thought I could run, I mean, I could ride 50 miles or I could ride 20 miles, and just make sure you're setting yourself up for success too, to go as slowly or as quickly as you want to, find people who are going to encourage that as well. And then, just savor it too. I think type A people have a tendency to just go, okay, this is for this. And so this is the only reason this is there. Right. So again, like me pulling out a camera and taking a picture of these moments along the way is cathartic. And it also slows me down because I don't like to go slow. And so I think grief forces us to slow down if we want to process it correctly and in a healthy way. And so if we, again, create that space to slow down, like we can do that. And look, there's places to be able to do that. There's more and more, gosh, just where we are too, right? The Fall Line Trail and in Ashland, like there's just places where you don't have to feel like you're endangering your life to do this. And there's lots of different resources as well. I mean, I stay connected on social media, trying to use the good elements of social media to like connect with other riders. And, before I went to visit my son, I put stuff out there to get insight from people. And so, generally, as a rule, I would say the cycling community is very gracious and kind. There's always going to be some boneheads in there. That's just the way it is. But find those kind people and tag along. And, there's find the gracious people and just stick to them in the midst of it. So.
Good advice. Good advice. You'll be pleased to know that Scott is currently tuning up our bikes, and we are doing a trip to New England in October. And so we're going to take the bikes with us. Hopefully it's going to be a leisurely ride. I'll not land in a creek anywhere. I won't fall off of my bike. But I appreciate your inspiration and for your willingness to talk about grief. I know it can be messy, but really, really appreciate your insight and for joining us today. So thank you so much. And we'll come soon.
Sounds good.
This episode of My Messy Grief. Grief is a reminder of our love for someone. Grieving is hard work and is meant to be felt, not fixed. If you know a parent grieving the loss of a child, send them our way at p23retreat.org. Likewise, if you want to help to support our ministry, Drop by our website to give the gift of hope to a grieving parent. May today be filled with moments of light, even in the darkness and messiness of grief.